Hello, my name is Stephen Mesquite, and I'm a graduate student at Texas State University. And today I'm going to be presenting our work regarding cross-cultural differences in prosocial lying on behalf of my colleagues from Texas State University and Erasmus University of Rotterdam. And so I want to begin with asking you to imagine for a second it's your Christmas and your grandma has given you a pair of brown, woolly, fuzzy, itchy socks. And she's now coming over to ask you what you think of her gift. And so for a moment, I want you to imagine which reaction to your grandma may be. One of your reactions may be to lie to be polite or lie to spare her feelings, also known as prosocial lying. And this is a largely socially appropriate behavior in most cultures. However, the situations that people engage in this may differ. So there are a lot of cross-cultural differences in the behaviors that support prosocial lying. This has largely been studied in America compared to the East Asian countries. However, this is largely unexplored, and this has been studied in things such as verbal display rules, which are informal norms about how to appropriately express emotions. So for example, one study looked at the expression of differing opinions, and they found that in Japan, it's actually encouraged to not express your differing opinion if you're a subordinate, whereas in the US, it is encouraged. So there are certain issues that come with this though. So for example, there are a lot of cross-cultural differences between the US and Japan. Japan is largely a collectivistic culture, where the US is largely an individualistic culture, and this presents a lot of different confounds that make it really difficult to study constructs like prosocial lying. And so comparing the US and the Netherlands presents the ideal test case scenario. So why explore differences in Western societies? Well, we share a lot of similarities with cultures like the Netherlands, because at the macro level, we're very, very similar, but at the micro level, we share certain differences. Specifically, we differ in key areas such as directness. So the Dutch are known to be super, super direct and super honest. However, this is largely anecdotal and stuff you'll find in things like travel guides or stereotypes. So for example, one of the travel guides for going to the Netherlands suggests that the Dutch aren't rude, they're just super direct, but however, people who aren't from the Netherlands take this as very literal and personal, when the Dutch are just speaking their mind. And then on the other end of the spectrum, us as Americans are relentlessly friendly. So for example, we often greet each other with, "Hi, how are you?" And this is often a rhetorical question, something that is not meant to be answered. However, people that aren't from the US take this literally and often perceive it as us wanting to engage in conversation with them. And so we conducted 2 studies to examine these cross-cultural differences. And the first study looked at cross-cultural differences in beliefs about prosocial lying. We hypothesized that the Dutch will express more disapproval regarding this behavior when compared to their American counterparts. And in study 2, we looked at whether or not there are differences presented in the actual anticipated social behavior of prosocial lying, and do the types of situations that we engage in this behavior matter. And so we have hypothesized that the Dutch will be more truthful, and that scenarios matter, even within cultures. So study one evaluated participants' self-reported attitudes regarding prosocial lying using the adapted version of the Theory of Planned Behavior questionnaire, which is a 14-item self-report questionnaire that possesses 5 subscales: attitude toward behavior, subjective norm, behavioral control, behavioral intention, and moral objectivity. All 5 of these subscales operated on a 7-point Likert scale. So for example, if someone was to respond to an item under the subjective norm subscale, they would read the question, "If I lie to be polite, most of the people who are important to me would 1, disapprove, or 7, approve." And then with moral objectivity, lying to be polite goes against my principles, disagree, or agree. And so to test our hypothesis, we conducted 5 independent t-tests. So on the vertical axis here, we have the average rate of prosocial lying, whether or not they approved of it. So higher numbers indicate more acceptability of this behavior. And so as you can see, we observed 4 significant differences. Starting with attitudes toward behavior, we did not see a significant difference between the US in blue and the Netherlands in orange. However, we did see differences in subjective norm, with the US favoring prosocial lying, viewing it as a more normative behavior when compared to Dutch counterparts. And with behavioral control, US participants indicated they possess more agency to this behavior when compared to their Dutch counterparts. They also illustrated more intention to engage in this behavior, and they also viewed it as more morally acceptable when compared to the Dutch. And so, to reintroduce our question, are there cross-cultural differences in beliefs regarding this behavior, specifically with its norms? Yes, there appears to be, which is evidenced by the US endorsing this behavior more than the Dutch, evidenced by these differences in the theory of planned behavior questionnaire. And so next steps, we want to examine the impact of cultural norms on behavior. And specifically, do these differences hold up across social scenarios? And so for study 2 was a subset of study 1. We introduced scenarios that span 2 categories. The first was potentially helpful, and this is where honest feedback may be potentially more beneficial than lying. And so within this, we had 2 different situations. We had feedback on a doodle, and then feedback on an assignment. And then continuing with this, the other category was personal preferences, and this is where having differing personal opinions in a friend. And so within this, we also had 2 situations. We had differing political opinions in a friend and differing opinions about songs. And so the outcomes of interest we were interested in were the likelihood of telling the truth, which would be measured on a 5-point Likert scale. So how likely are you to tell the truth in the assignment condition? And then, was truth the most likely response selected? So in a forced choice scenario, if you're going to give feedback to a friend on a doodle, are you more likely to tell the truth, to lie, or to mask, which means to kind of avoid the situation? And so to assess these differences, we conducted 2 mixed design ANOVAs comparing the influence of culture across scenario. So we looked at the average likelihood of telling the truth. Higher numbers indicate that they were more likely to tell the truth. And then on the horizontal axis, we have the actual scenarios and then the situations within the scenarios. So with the personal preferences scenarios, we can look at this. We see differences between the actual conditions themselves. So people were more likely to tell the truth in the song condition than the politics condition. And then within this, we see that the Dutch were more likely to tell the truth, evidenced by the orange bars, than their Americans in the blue. And this holds up across the song and politics conditions. And we did not see a significant interaction with this. However, looking at the potentially helpful conditions, we did see significant difference again between the 2 situations, with people emphasizing truthfulness in the assignment condition when compared to the drawing condition. And then again within this, we do see that the Dutch have this proclivity for telling the truth, regardless of the conditions, when compared to their American counterparts. And we did see a significant interaction with this, and this may illustrate that these types of situations that we engage in do matter for our likelihood of telling the truth. And so, one more time, big picture, we do see significant differences between the scenarios and within cultures. However, it's important to note that the potentially helpful scenarios may be a little nuanced, as people are more likely to tell the truth in the assignment condition, and this may be related to the actual social impact of not giving your friend honest feedback about their assignment and kind of setting them up for failure. And so to further vet this, we conducted 2 mixed effects logistic regressions, examining the effect of culture and scenario on likelihood of telling the truth. And just to refresh your memory, this is with the forced choice scenarios. So higher numbers indicate higher frequency of truth-telling engaged in these scenarios, which are here for you on the bottom on the horizontal axis, again grouped by scenario and then situation. So we did see that people were more likely to tell the truth in the song condition when compared to the politics condition, and within that, participants from the Netherlands were more likely to tell the truth than participants for the US. And then looking at the potentially helpful condition, again, people were more likely to tell the truth in the assignment condition when compared to the drawing condition. And then again, within that, the Dutch have this proclivity for being honest and telling the truth, regardless of the situations, when compared to their American counterparts. And one more time, big picture, we see that there are differences in likelihood, frequency of telling the truth between the personal preferences and potentially helpful condition. But again, if you look closely, people are more likely to tell the truth in the assignment condition than the drawing condition, being that there's a bigger difference when you look at the personal preferences and potentially helpful situations. And so this may again suggest that these situations are nuanced. And so to reintroduce our research question, are there differences present in anticipated social behavior across culture? Yes, there appear to be, with the Dutch favoring honesty compared to their American counterparts. And there's also convergent findings with this. So our findings with the ANOVA seem to match up with our findings with the bivariate logistic regression. And the second part of our question was, does the likelihood of truthfulness vary based on social context? Yes, it appears it does. Truthfulness does seem to vary across scenario and culture, which is evidenced by these large disparities between truthfulness with the potentially helpful scenario, with people more likely to tell the truth in the assignment condition when compared to the drawing condition. So our findings do suggest that the presence of cross-cultural differences regarding the acceptability of prosocial lying drive these disparities between the Dutch and the US, again with the Dutch having a proclivity for telling the truth when compared to their American counterparts. Additionally, there is evidence of cross-cultural differences in communication, evidenced by the theory of planned behavior, as these norms regarding directness seem to differ. And there are also differences in anticipated social behavior, which are also consistent with these norms, again with the Dutch being more likely to tell the truth when compared to their American counterparts. And it's also important to consider a variety of social contexts when observing this behavior. And so for future directions, it would be important to look at this in a real life engagement setting. So for example, how often do people actually engage in this when they're at the bar, when they're at the movies, when they're at a restaurant, then in a lab or survey setting? Are there additional social dimensions we need to consider? Does the recipient matter? So if you're going to tell grandma prosocial lie, are you more likely to dress this up or engage in this more frequently with your family members when compared to someone on the street? Does the social context matter? For example, if you're in the library, are you more likely to tell someone that, that book's really interesting when it's not? Or when you're at the bar, are you more likely to tell to someone that you really like their shoes when they're actually not that great? And how are these differences socialized? So for example, when are they socialized during lifespan development? Are they socialized early on when you're a toddler or an adolescent or in young adulthood? And then by whom are they socialized? So is it your parents, your primary caregiver, your teachers, or are they strangers on the street? In these microtransactions that we have with them, are they what shapes our behavior? And so if you have any questions, you can reach us at the email addresses below our pictures. It's been a pleasure having you listen to me over the last several minutes, and I hope you have a great day.